End of quote, again from Difficult Freedom. My commentary. Do we not get here in a homology, I am tempted to claim, with the way Marx in the first chapter of Capital develops three forms of the expression of value of a commodity, a kind of passage from simple to developed form. First, only two of us, I am responsible for you. Then, when what Marx called developed form, I am responsible for all of you. And then, the general equivalent and its reversal. I am the privileged side of responsibility for all of you, which is why you are all effectively responsible to me. Is this not the truth of such an ethical stance, thereby confirming the old Hegelian suspicion that every self-denigration secretly asserts its contrary? It is like the proverbial political correctness of the Western white male who questions his own right to assert his cultural identity, while celebrating the exotic identity of others, but thereby asserting his privileged status of the universal neutral medium of recognizing others' identities. Self-questioning is always, by definition, the obverse, the other side of self-privileging. There is always something false about respect for others, which is based on questioning one's own right to exist. Let me now quote a longer passage again from Difficult Freedom, which is, I think, Levinas at its best and in its worst. And you need to have the passage from the best to the worst. The best being the wonderful assertion of the Jewish law as precisely an uprooted law, and the worst you will see. Quote, every word is an uprooting. The constitution of a real society is an uprooting. The end of an existence in which the being at home is absolute, and everything comes from within. Paganism is putting down roots. The advent of the scriptures, Old Testament, is not the subordination of the spirit to a letter, but the substitution of the letter to the soul. The spirit is free within the letter, and it is enslaved within the root. It is on the arid soil of the desert, where nothing is fixed, of course, reference to Palestine and so on, that the true spirit descended into a text in order to be universally fulfilled. Paganism is the local spirit. Nationalism in terms of its cruelty and pitilessness. A humanity with roots that possesses God inwardly, with the sap rising from the earth, is a forest of pre-human humanity. A history in which the idea of a universal God must only be fulfilled requires a beginning. It requires an elite. It is not through pride that Israel feels it has been chosen. It has to be obtained, obtain this through grace. Each time the people are judged, Israel is judged. It is because the universality of the divine exists only in the form in which it is fulfilled in the relation between men, and because it must be fulfillment and expansion, that the category of a privileged civilization exists in the economy of creation. This civilization is defined in terms not of prerogatives, but of responsibilities. Every person as a person, that is to say, one conscious of his freedom, is chosen. If being chosen takes on a national appearance, it is because only in this form can a civilization be constituted, be maintained, be transmitted, and endure. End of quote. So, again, all people participate in universality, but Jews are more universal than others. Another quote from Difficult Freedom. The Jewish faith involves tolerance because, from the beginning, it bears the entire weight of all other men. And again, I think this is Jewish men's burden. Insofar as Jews are absolutely responsible for all of us, is it not that, at a kind of a reflexive level, we are all doubly responsible to the Jews, or in an inverted way? If they are responsible for all of us, is it not that the way to get rid of our responsibility is to annihilate them, those who condense our responsibility? To avoid any misunderstanding, my point here is that in a strange way what Levinas develops is almost the opposite of the implicit anti-Semitic reasoning. Now, back to Spinoza. A Spinozian answer to Levinas would have been that our existence is not at the expense of others, but it is part of the network of reality. There is for Spinoza no Hobbesian self as extracted from and opposed to reality. Spinoza's ontology is an ontology of full immanence to the world. I am just the network of my relations with the world and within the world. I'm totally externalized in these relations. My conatus, my tendency to assert myself, is therefore not my assertion at the expense of the world, but my full acceptance of being part of the world, my assertion of the wider reality within which I can only thrive. The opposition of egotism and altruism is thus overcome in Spinoza. I fully am, not as an isolated self, but in the thriving reality, part of which I am. Levinas, therefore, I think, secretly imputes to Spinoza an egotistic, subjectivist, if you want, notion of my existence. His anti-Spinozian questioning of my right to exist is inverted arrogance, as if I am the center whose existence threatens all others. So the answer should not be an assertion of my right to exist in harmony with and tolerance of others, but a more radical claim. Do I exist at all in the first place? Am I not, rather, a whole in the order of being? This brings us to the ultimate paradox on account of which I think Levinasian answer is not sufficient. I am effectively a threat to the entire order of being, not insofar as I positively exist as part of this order, but precisely insofar as I am a whole in the order of being. As such, as nothing, I am a striving to reach out and appropriate everything. Only a nothing can desire to become everything. It was already Schelling who defined subject as the endless striving of the nothing to become everything. And on the contrary, a positive living being, occupying a determinate space in reality, rooted in it, is by definition a moment of its circulation and reproduction. Again, recall the already mentioned politically correct landscape. People far from the Western world are allowed to fully assert their particular ethnic identity in this politically correct vision without being proclaimed essentialist, racist, identitarians, and so on. If you are far away, if you are black, Native American, okay, all your sins, like, I don't know, deprivation of women and so on, are forgotten. Now, the closer you get to the notorious white heterosexual males, the more problematic your assertion becomes. Asians are still okay. Italians and Irish maybe. With Germans and Scandinavians, it is still problematic. However, such a prohibition of asserting the particular identity of white men as the model of oppression of others, although it presents itself as the admission of their guilt, nonetheless confers on them a central position. This very prohibition to assert their particular identity makes them into the universal neutral medium, the place from which the truth about others' oppression is accessible. One should therefore assume the risk of countering Levinas's position with a more radical one. Others are primordially an ethically indifferent multitude. And love is a violent gesture of cutting into this multitude and privileging someone, as two words, as the neighbor, thus introducing a radical imbalance into the whole. In contrast to love, justice begins when I remember the faceless many left in shadow in this privileging of the one. Justice and love are structurally incompatible. Justice, not love, has to be blind. It has to disregard the privileged one whom I really understand. What this means is that the third is not secondary. It is always already here. And the primordial ethical obligation is towards this third, who is not here in the face-to-face relationship. The one in shadow, the absent of a love couple. In order to properly grasp the triangle of love, hatred, and indifference, one has to rely on the logic of the universal and its constitutive exception. The truth of the universal proposition, man is mortal, does not imply the existence of even one man.